Hi everyone. Today I will be explaining the skeletal system. An adult human body skeletal system is made up of 206 bones. This is a very basic information that everyone must know it. So, an adult skeletal system is made up of 206 bones. This number must be memorized. These 206 bones that make up the skeletal system, they have a great variation in size and shape. So they vary, like they differ in size and shape. And this variation, this difference in size and shape can enable them to play different roles in the human body. Okay, I think this is pretty simple to be digested. The skeleton. The skeleton, if you have noticed, the drawing that you have in the book, this one, it has like two colors. The purple colors, like all the bones with the pink or the purple colors, they make up the something called the axial skeleton. So axial are the purple ones or the pink ones. And then the yellow ones are the appendicular. The appendicular skeleton. They are mentioned down. I will show you the terms. So if we just scroll down a little bit, I have provided you with two more figures that are not in the book, but they will tell you what's the difference or which parts make up these two different skeletons. As you can see, the axial skeleton is made up of bones like skull, sternum, ribs, and spine. Why is it called axial? Axial means from the axis, the bones that make up the center of the skeletal system. So they make up again skull, the sternum, ribs, and spine. On the other side, there are appendicular skeleton. The appendicular skeleton is made up of bones like clavicle, the scapula, the bones of arms and legs, and also the pelvis. So you should memorize the bones that make up these two different skeletons. And concerning this diagram, try to memorize the labels. Like most of them, they will repeat themselves during the section, but try to memorize them all. So you have the cranium, which means it's one of the bones of the skull where brain is located. Maxilla and mandibles, they are the upper and lower jaw. I think it would be better if I use a highlighter. And then you have the cervical vertebrae and also the lumbar vertebrae and the cervical vertebrae. These three parts, they are the parts of the vertebral column or the bones of the vertebral column. You have the bones of the shoulder like clavicle and scapula. You can see where are they located from the points. And then what else? There are the bones of the chest region, which include the sternum and the ribs. And then the bones of the arm that include the humerus, this part, the humerus, the radius, and the ulna. And then the bone of pelvis. And then what is left, it is only the bones of limbs, except for pubis, which is a very low part of the vertebral column. As you can see, the bones of the upper limbs, or let's say the arms, they are called carpals and metacarpals. So those that are located toward the end of the arm are called meta. Meta means like toward the end. And for those of the feet, they are called tarsals and metatarsals. So for those of hand, they are called carpals. For those of feet, they are called tarsals. You see there is kind of similarity in the word structure. The bones of the lower limbs or the legs, they are the femur, the patella, tibia, and fibula. Patella, you will study patella reflex in the nervous system. You will know what this patella and how does it respond to, there's a test, it's called patella reflex test. You will see how this works. Yeah, I think that's it about the parts. Now let's go to the functions or the roles that the skeletal system play in our body. First of all, it provides a rigid framework. It provides a rigid network, a rigid basement in order for the muscles to attach and attach to the bones and then to pull them to provide us with the movement. Like without bones, muscles couldn't provide our body with a movement, like we couldn't move. So bones, they make like an anchorage site for muscles to attach and to move them so that we can make a movement. What else? Giving shape and structure. Of course, our skeletal system to a large extent will shape us, will give us a specific shape and structure. More, it also support and protect delicate internal organs. There are many organs in our body that are protected by at least a bone. For example, the examples even are given below. For example, as you can see here, the ribs, from the rib cage, they can protect the heart and the lungs inside the thoracic cavity. And the cranium, which is one of the skull bones, it is where the brain is located and it's protected by this bone. So that was the third function, which is protection and support for the internal delicate organs. What else? Storing minerals. Minerals like calcium, like phosphorus, are stored in our skeleton and they can be used in many metabolic processes whenever they are needed. What else? Inside many bones, there is something called bone marrow. The bone marrow is responsible for producing blood cells, including red blood cells, platelets, and also white blood cells. So these are the 5 main functions of bones. So they provide a rigid framework against which muscles can pull them. They give us shape and structure. What else? They support and protect delicate organs, mineral storage, and blood cell production. Okay, so you may have thought that the bone is what gives us most of our weight, which is not true. Imagine our bones can only make up 20% of our total body weight or mass. So only 20%. For example, if someone, let's say, weighs 100 kilograms, then only 20 kilograms of that weight will be the weight of bones. There's also another misconception, like many people may have thought that bones are dry and rigid, which are actually not, because we just have we have seen them and maybe as a model in the lab or maybe museums. They do look like dry rigid structures, but they are not dry and rigid. Instead, they are moist and living tissues, just like any other body tissue. They are made up of living cells. They are getting nutrients, oxygen, and they are moist. Okay, so let's go through the structure of a long bone. A long bone is made up of 4 structures. Periosteum, it is the outermost structure, like if you go from the outer to the center of the long bone. Now we will go to the figure, but I just want you to remember these terms: periosteum, compact bone, spongy bone, and bone marrow. These are the four main parts of a long bone. Now let's just point them on the figure, because if you are not using figures, then you cannot remember the details of each part, and you cannot remember where are they located exactly. So let's point them. Now you look at this part. It is a section of a long bone. This section, if you go from the outside to inside, which part comes first, or what is the outermost part of a long bone? The very first part is the periosteum. This is first. The periosteum, if you see where does the label points, it's like a membrane. It's like, you see, it's like a covering, a tough membrane. And you see there are blood vessels that run through or along with this membrane. So this tough membrane is kind of protection and also prevention of drying out. The second part, as you go toward the center of the bone, the second part, it is the compact bone. This is second. Compact bone, you see, I will just try to label the part. This is all the compact bone, like all this part. So the compact bone, it is called compact because the structures, or let's say the elements that make up the compact bone are they are tightly compacted, like there are little or no spaces, no gaps left. We will come to the details of each part, the structure and composition. Then there is spongy bone. It's called spongy because it, just like a sponge, it has porous, like it has many cavities and gap inside. The fourth one is the bone marrow, which is not in the section, but as you can see, it can fill the cavities of the spongy bone, and it is located in the center of long bones, in their shafts. So these are the four main parts of a long bone. Now let's go into the details. So periosteum, as we already mentioned, it's a tough membrane that covers the entire bone surface. So it's the outermost tough membrane that covers the bone completely. What does it contain? This membrane contains a network of blood vessels, and not only blood vessels, but also it has nerves which can signal pain. So the periosteum has blood vessels. I believe you know the role of blood vessels. Blood vessels, they supply the organ or the tissue with oxygen and nutrients, and they remove away carbon dioxide and other metabolic wastes. So this is the periosteum, a tough membrane that covers the entire bone surface. It has blood vessels and nerves, blood vessels to supply nutrients and oxygen, and the nerve signal, or the nerve supply, is to signal any kind of pain, which is a mean for protection. Then you have the compact bone. Okay, the compact bone, from the name, it's compact, like in structure. So as you can see here, it says it's a hard material. Where is it located? The location is very important. Right under the periosteum. It is located under the periosteum. So it is the second part of the bone if you go from the outside to the center. What else? It is a thick layer. It's not thin. This layer is thick. And it is compact. Its function enabling the shaft of long bones to endure the large amount of stress. Usually in large bones, this compact bone, it provide us with, let's say, to resist large amounts of stress or injuries. So it's like a shock absorber. Like activities during jumping, the compact bone of long bones can endure this, this source of stress. All right. Now let's see the structure of the compact bond. First, you should know that the compact bond is made up of what? Cylinders of mineral crystal and protein fibers. I will just point on the figure, try to see where I am pointing. You see the cylinders? Maybe I would use a better color. These cylinders where I have pointed. These cylinders are called lamellae. These cylinders are made up of minerals or mineral crystals like calcium and protein fibers. And inside or in the center of each cylinder, there is a cavity. As you can see now, for example, this one is, it's magnified, a section. You see there are like dark pores or dark dots on the structure, appearing on the structure of a compact bond. These dots, they indicate a cavity, and the cavity or the canal is known as the Haversian canal. The Haversian canal. So the Haversian canal is located at the center of lamellae, those cylinders of minerals and protein fibers. Okay, so now the lamellae is located around the Haversian canal, or in other words, the Haversian canal is located at the center of each lamellae. What is inside these cavities? Are they like, let's say, they don't have anything inside? No, of course not. As you can see on the diagram where I'm pointing, students, this part, you see in the cavity there are blood vessels running, like arteries and veins. So we already mentioned the blood vessels, as in the azure that are found in the periosteum. They supply the bone tissues with nutrients, oxygen, and they remove away CO2 and other metabolic wastes. So the role is mentioned clearly in this part of the text. All right. What else is located in the structure of bones? We haven't mentioned the bone cells yet. If you remember, bone, from the first section, bone was a good example for connective tissue. So it's a type of connective tissue. And connective tissue is a heterogeneous tissue. Like, it's not only made up of cells, but also there are protein fibers, there are minerals, there is a matrix, and also there are cells. The cells that make up the bone, they must be bone cells. And the bone cells in Latin are called osteocytes. Osteo from Latin means bone, and cytes means cell. So osteocyte means bone cells. So where are these bone cells located? The bone cells are located where? The locations are important. The bone cells are embedded within the gaps between the protein layers. We did mention the protein fibers, the lamellae, and the crystal, mineral crystals. So between the gaps that are left between these protein fibers and mineral crystals, there are osteocytes located. So to fill the gaps and to make the bone to be more compact. The third part of the long bone is the spongy bone. It's called the spongy, as we mentioned earlier, because of being porous or having gaps inside. The spongy bone, so it's like a network of connective tissue. It is a connective tissue. Since it's a bone, so it's a connective tissue. But where is it located? It is located beneath the compact bone. We say the compact bone is located beneath or under the periosteum, and the spongy bone is located beneath the compact bone. Even if you have noticed on this diagram, see, this is a periosteum, the outermost membrane, and then you have the compact bone. This part is all the compact bone, and then you have the spongy bone right here. All the pink tissue is the spongy bone. All right, so the spongy bone, it's the name of the spongy bone suggests that this bone is soft, but it is not. Instead, it is hard and strong. It's made up of hard and strong tissues. Although there are gaps, but the tissue itself is hard and strong. And the spongy bone is usually making a lattice work, like a network, okay, with many spikes. And the spikes are arranged in a way in order to tolerate pressure or stress. Okay, if you just look at the diagram where I am pointing, you see the spikes? The spikes, these extensions, they are arranged in a way in order to endure the pressure and stress, just like the compact bone, the way that compact bone works. The presence of cavities in the spongy bone makes spongy bones to be light and strong. They are light, like light in weight. They are not heavy. And that's why we already mentioned that the bones, despite of their size and number, but they constitute a small percentage of our body weight because they are mostly hollow, like they have gaps inside the spongy bone. The very last part of most bones, or the long bones, let's say, it is the bone marrow. Bone marrow can be red or yellow. They can be of two types, and they are found in different locations and in different bones. Alright, so let's start with the red bone marrow. The red bone marrow is found in spongy bone. Okay, wherever there is spongy bone, the cavities of the spongy bone are filled with red bone marrow. And where else? The end of long bones, the ends. If you just look at the figure below, you see this is the end of the long bone, and this is where the red bone marrow is located. Where else? The ribs, the vertebrae, which means the bones of the spine or vertebral column, the sternum, and also the pelvis. As I told you, you will see the name of bones in many parts of this section, so try to memorize it all. So this is where the red bone marrow is located, and this is very important for the general examinations. They always bring such questions, about the locations. The function of the red bone marrow is producing blood cells, as we already mentioned, like red blood cells, platelets, and also white blood cells. And see, there is one more diagram. As you can see, this is where the red bone marrow is located in the long bone. See, it produces red blood cells, white blood cells, and also platelets. The other type of the bone marrow is the yellow bone marrow. Okay. The yellow bone marrow. Where is it located? It fills the shaft of long bones, not their ends. When we say the shaft means, like, you see, okay, just let me point where I am trying to point. Okay. See, this is a yellow bone marrow. It is located in the shaft, like this area. The shaft of the long bone, not the ends, okay? Not the ends, the shaft. So it's found in the shaft of long bones. Where else? Also, also, it is found in flat bones, and the function of the yellow bone marrow is that it can work as an energy reserve. Energy reserve because its structure composition is fat. The structure of the yellow bone marrow is fat, and fats, lipids, they can provide us with energy. They can work as an energy reserve or storage for long-term energy. What else? The yellow bone marrow, in case if a severe blood loss happen, the yellow bone marrow can be converted into red bone marrow and produce blood cells just as red bone marrow. So it can be converted to red bone marrow and take its function, producing red blood cells or blood cells in general when there is a severe blood loss, like for example when an accident happens. Alright, now we have the injuries and repair. Although bones are strong, but they can crack or even break. This can happen in case if the stress is from unusual directions, or if there is a sudden stress or impact or extreme loads. When the bones are subjected to such pressure, there is a possibility of crack or break to happen. Cracks and breaks, they are also referred to as fracture. So fracture is any crack or break in the bone. What about the healing of fractures in case of the circulation, the blood vessels, if they are maintained, and also if the periosteum survived, the healing process will be kind of simple. So it will occur even if the damage to the bone is severe. So in this case, what is important is the periosteum, the membrane, and also the circulation. If these are safe, even if the bone is broken, it can repair its tissues and reattach after a while. And you see the diagrams, one of them is the x-ray, the other is a diagram showing a break in the humerus, the arm bone. Now, how do bones develop? How do they grow? We must recall that most of our bones, they were cartilage at first during the embryonic development. Okay? And cartilage, it is a tough or flexible connective tissue. It is flexible. It's more flexible than the bone. When do bones start to develop or to grow? In the second month of fetal development, much of the skeleton is the cartilage. It's not bone, it's mostly cartilage, the skeletal system. But then, during the third month of pregnancy, the bone will start to develop. And what makes bones, it is the osteocytes. The bone cells, they start to develop and they start to release minerals like calcium that can lodge or that can fill the spaces between the cartilage cells, and so turning the cartilage into into a bone. So if I can draw something here, I would draw, let's assume these are the cartilage cells. Why they have flexibility? Because the matrix is semi-solid and also there are some spaces. But let's assume the pink color, it is for the cartilage cells, and the green one is for the bone cells. So the bone cells, some of them, they will develop during the third week of pregnancy. These bone cells, they will start to produce minerals, or let's say to release minerals, and these minerals like calcium, phosphorus, they will fill the cavities that are located between the cartilage cells. And when these cavities are filled, and the minerals will solidify the structure, turning the cartilage tissue into a bone tissue. That's what happens during the bone development. The process is called ossification. The process is called ossification. So ossification means turning cartilage into bone, or replacement of cartilage by bone. Because of what is the principle of ossification? It is when bone cells are releasing minerals, or the deposition of minerals between the cartilage cells can turn the cartilage into bone. Okay, so now it's clear that the fetal cartilage is eventually replaced by bone, but this doesn't work for all the bones. Like in an adult person, not all the bones are turned into not all the cartilage is turned into the bones. But for example, the bones of the end of the nose, the outer ear, the bones inside, the inside the trachea, they are not bones. They are cartilaginous structures, right? As you have noticed, the ear is not a tough bone. It's a cartilage, the same as nose. Even there's a cartilage located in the joints between two bones. So this is where the cartilage is found in an adult person. So it's not necessary for all the bone to be converted or to be developed from the cartilage. Some of the cartilage will still remain in an adult person. You see there are two notes. One of them stating that some parts like skull, they don't go through the cartilage stage of skeletal development. Like during the embryonic development in early stages, the connective tissue, okay, just I want to highlight where I am stating, the connective tissue is not converted into, or it's not, let's say, developed into cartilage, but it's rather directly develops into bone, not cartilage. So it becomes let's say plates of bones in the skull, not the cartilage. So in the skull, some parts, they don't undergo the cartilage stage. The connective tissue directly form bone tissue, is not the cartilage. That was about the bone development. Now let's see, how do bones grow, or how do they elongate, how do they increase their length and the diameter. Two things should always be taken into consideration: the timing, when does it happen? So bones continue to develop after the birth, or let's say between the early childhood and the late adolescence. That's why for a person that has reached to the age of 20 or 24, we can say that's the maximum bone elongation normally. So like from the early childhood or after birth till the late adolescence, that's a period during which a bone can elongate, can grow. Now that was about the time, when, and where does bone elongation take place. It is mentioned here, end of long bones. What are they called? What is the region called? Epiphyseal plate. The epiphyseal plate. Let me just show you where is epiphyseal plate. See, this is a long bone. This area is what's called the epiphyseal plate. Okay, the epiphyseal plate, and it's where the bone elongation take place in long bones. Okay, so epiphyseal plate is composed of cartilage cells, and these cartilage cells, they are active, they divide, and they form like columns, pushing older cells toward the middle of the bone. As these older cells, they die, they are replaced by new bone cells. See, how do they form like columns? You just focus on these columns where I am pointing, see? Like columns, like rows. So these columns are produced when cartilage cells, they divide, they push the older cells toward where? Toward the center, the center of the bone, in this direction, toward the center of the bone. And then the bone cells will take the place of older cartilage cells, and when more cells come to make a layer, that means the bone is elongating, the bone is increasing its length. There is something that must be mentioned. Why does the bone elongation, let's say, cease at some period or after the person has reached a certain age? It's because when all the cartilage is converted or is replaced by bone, so at this point bone grows no longer or doesn't elongate in a person, and you can say that at that point the person has reached to a full height. So that's why for a person that has reached to the age of 20, 24, that's it. Like normally, naturally, he cannot grow any longer. Joints. Joints is another part of the skeletal system, and it is basically the point where two bones join or meet. That's why they are called joint, because it's a point where two bones they join. Two bones join or meet. Joints are of three types, students. They can be fixed joints, they can be semi-movable, and they can be movable joints. Depending on what? Depending on the range of movement that they can provide. Fixed, from the name, fixed joints, they cannot provide us with any movement, so they actually prevent movement. Where are these joints located? They are located between the plates of the skull, for example. That's in the skull. If you just go to or see the figure, you see there is a joint pointed here. It's a fixed joint. It's located in the skull. It doesn't allow any kind of movement. This type of joints are called fixed joints. The second type of joint are semi-movable joints. The semi-movable joints, they can provide a movement, but not, let's say, a movement in different directions. Like it's a limited movement, few movement. Where are these type of joints located? Semi means half movable joints, like a little. They are moving, but a little with limited movement. So these joints are located where they hold the bones of the vertebral column. Like between the bones of the vertebral column, there are cartilaginous discs located. I believe these discs are mentioned here, cartilaginous disc. These discs are made up of cartilage tissue, and they are providing a limited movement for the vertebral column. Like when you are bending your back, you're arcing your back, you're just making a little movement in your back. This is a rule of, or this is where the semi-movable joints found. Where else? Semi-movable joints can also be found. The locations are very important. Please focus. They can also be found in the rib cage. Just focus on the figure on the right. Focus on the yellow bones. The yellow bones are the costal cartilage, the yellow bones. Focus on the yellow bones. They are the cartilage, and they attach the blue bones, which are the ribs, to the green bone, which is the sternum. You see, the yellow bones, they are cartilage in structure, and they can provide some kind of movement during the process of inhalation in order for the rib cage to expand during breathing. It's mentioned in the explanation as well. So these cartilage, they connect the ribs with the sternum, allowing the chest to expand during breathing process. The third type of joints is the movable joints, which is the most various and abundant type of joints in the skeletal system. The movable joints, from the name, they are the joints that can provide a wide range of movements and activities. So because they are highly movable, so they can provide different types of movements, or let's say many movements. They are divided into 5 types. Okay, so if you just focus on the figure at first, you see the fixed joint are located in the skull. Semi-movable joints are located between the uh, bones of the vertebral column. Okay, and also they can be found in the between the ribs and the sternum. Now we have the movable joints. I have colored them all with a blue background. At first you have the hinge joint. I will just point it on the figure. See where I am pointing? Like the elbow joint. This is a hinge joint. Why is it called hinge joint? Hinge, it's like a hinged door. A hinged door. A hinged door, you know, there are some doors that when you open or close, like those of the roof, you know, when you open, you will pull the handle of the door, you know, upward, and then when you close it downward. So it's like a hinge joint. It just provides two types of movement, this type of joint, upward and downward. Where is hinge joint is found? It is found like in the elbow joint. The other type of the joint, it is the ball and socket joint. Why is it called ball and socket? Let's just see where is it located. You see the joint that links the femur, the thigh bone, femur, with the pelvis. This joint is of ball and socket type. Let me draw you something about this type of joint. Why is it called ball and socket? You know what does ball mean? So one of the bone, its head is like a ball. And why is it called a socket? Because the point where it's attached, it's like, you know, a complementary in shape, and it's like a hole, like a socket. So you see, now this one can rotate. The bone can rotate, right? So this is why is it called ball and socket joint. Okay, ball and socket joint. Yeah. So how many kind of movements it can provide? Sorry. Let me highlight it. You see, up, down, forward, backward. So it could be like a complete circle, rotation. The pivot joint, the third type, which is a pivot joint. Okay, focus on where am I pointing. The pivot joint. It is located, in the neck region, the part where the head is attached to the vertebral column. So the pivot joint, as it's mentioned here, where it's formed by the top two vertebrae, the very top two bones. Vertebrae means the bones of the vertebral column of the spine. So in this bones, the type of joint is a pivot joint. It can just allow you to turn your head from side to side, just like when you are shaking your head and saying like you're meaning like no. So the upper two bones of the vertebral column, they have a joint called pivot joint. This pivot joint, they can only turn your head, to the left and the right, and just when you shake your head, it's that joint that provide you with that kind of movement. So side to side, left to right. The fourth type of movable joint, it is the saddle joint. The saddle joint, if you focus on when I am pointing, see it's located at the bottom of your thumb, at the base of your thumb. It provides your thumb with rotation, so you can rotate your thumb, and this can be helpful in grasping objects. When you want to touch or grasp something with your thumb involved, this joint will be handy. Gliding joints. Okay, so see where am I pointing? This is a gliding joint. It's also a type of movable joint. It is located between the small bones. This type of joint is located between the small bones of our feet. They allow the feet to flex during walking. When you're walking, your feet has to flex, and this flexion is provided by the gliding type of movable joint. So just as bones, joints are also subjected to a great deal of pressure and stress, but they do have some adaptations and they are suited to meet these demands. So one of them, it is the presence of cartilage. One of the adaptive structures in joints, it is the presence of cartilage. The cartilage will cover the bone surfaces and protect them from friction. Friction, you know what does friction mean? When two bones rub against each other, and it can be painful. What else? What other structures can be found in joint? Okay, so also ligaments. Ligaments, students, they are also a type of connective tissue. Ligaments, I'm going to point it. Where are ligaments and how do they look like? If you see these bands, like white bands, and this one, I'm not talking about the yellow bone inside that runs below. The uppermost white connective tissue, it's like a band of connective tissue. They are called ligament. Ligaments, they connect bone to bone. You see, this is all a ligament. The upper one, I mean the white one. It's like a thin band of connective tissue, but it's very tough and strong. It links bones to bones. But tendon connects bones to muscles. You should know the difference. We will come to that later. Tendons, you will study them in muscular system, but now you should know that ligaments that hold bones at the joint point. So we can say they connect bone to bone, or they hold the bones of the joint in place. It's like a support. Another structure that's found, okay, that is found in the joint is synovial fluid. Synovial fluid is not found in all joints, okay, but in most joints this fluid is present. It's actually a lubricating substance. You know what does lubricating mean? Like a mechanic would use different types of oils to lubricate the ends of, you know, those iron tools in order to prevent any kind of annoying sounds when they are making movements, or not to rub against each other, not to erode. So the presence of lubricating substance is very important. It can also decrease or avoid the risk of friction. So in order for the bone not to rub against each other and not to feel any kind of pain, because friction can result in damage eventually. Okay, sometimes a damage to the knee joint can cause swelling in the compartments when contain where the synovial fluid is located. So sometimes swelling can happen to the knee joint, and there are disorders. We are going to mention them. So now focus on the drawing. You can see here, okay, let me just clear up these labels again. You have the femur bone, which is a bone that comes from the, you know, that connects the lower bone of the leg. Tibia, fibula with the pelvis. The patella, this is a patella, the patella. And the tibia, the thicker bone, I mean this bone, is a tibia. And the thinner bone is a fibula. And then you have the ligament that connects bone to bone. And there are cartilage. We did mention that there is cartilage found in joints. This cartilage covers the bone surface, preventing friction. And see, there is synovial fluid. Synovial fluid is located in these compartments as a lubricating substance. And also, C is mentioned here, it nourishes the tissues inside the joint. So it's not only a lubricant, it's also a nutrition source. Now let's see what bone disorders can develop in a person. Okay, so the joint disorders or the joint diseases, they are commonly referred to as arthritis, which is characterized by painful, swollen joints. Usually the person will feel a lot of pain and swelling in the joint area. Arthritis is of two types. It can be of rheumatoid type or osteotype. Rheumatoid arthritis is not related to age, like it can be found, let's say, in all the different ages with the same percentage or similar percentage. But the osteoarthritis, it is most common in old people. So you can say the risk of developing osteoarthritis is increasing with age. Okay. The main difference is that rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease. So when the immune system attack the joint tissues or the tissues that are located in the joint, this can result in rheumatoid arthritis. So it's an autoimmune disease. And what are the symptoms? The joint will inflamed, will swell, swollen, stilled, and deformed. These are the four symptoms that can develop because of rheumatoid arthritis. On the other hand, osteoarthritis, it is a degenerative joint disease, so it's not an autoimmune disease. It has nothing to do with immune system. It's just a disease, a degenerative, which means the cartilage degenerate, like damage happened to the cartilage over time that cover the surface of the bones at the joint area. So when the cartilage gets thinner, the bones will start to rub against each other, okay? And rubbing there are nerve cells that they will transmit the pain signals to the brain, and the person may feel a lot of pain and severe discomfort. So that was the main differences. Rheumatoid is autoimmune. Osteoarthritis is a degenerative joint disease that cartilage start to get thinner and rougher. The symptoms of rheumatoid: inflammation, swelling, stilting, deformation, while the symptoms of the osteoarthritis, the person will feel severe discomfort because of the bone surfaces rubbing against each other. Rheumatoid is not related to the age, but osteoarthritis is more common in elderly people. You have the section review and answers. Question 1 and 2 are already mentioned, like the first one stating that lists the major parts of the axial skeleton, right? And the second one saying name 5 function of bones. The third one stating illustrate the structure of long bone. We already mentioned that. The parts like periosteum, compartment, spongy bone, Haversian canal, bone marrow, osteocytes, and you can even give it a little explanation. When does the ossification of most bones in the body begin to develop? When does cartilage, the process of replacing cartilage by bone begin? We did mention that can start during the embryonic development, early stages. So the bone will start to ossify and continue. And we said the process of bone elongation happens in the epiphyseal plates. Fifth, describe the function of the 3 major types of joint and give an example of each. We did mention them and they are on the figure. Differentiate between the 2 types of arthritis, they are mentioned. Which type of arthritis is not related to the age? We did mention that the rheumatoid arthritis, because it's an autoimmune disease, it can happen at any period of, throughout the lifetime. 8 relating concepts. How are the structures of cartilage and bone related to the function each performs uh, in the body? So, the main difference between bone and cartilage, if you remember from the first section, the bone's matrix is solid and it can provide us with a rigid structure that can provide anchorage for muscles to pull them and to provide us with a movement. But cartilage is more flexible. It can be more like, covering the surfaces of bone and, preventing friction to happen in the joint areas. So that was in terms of function, but in terms of structure, cartilage has a semi-solid matrix, but the bone matrix is solid, so it's rigid, while cartilage is flexible. That's the main difference. If we just see some of the general examination questions, I know the time is limited. We already have explained too much, but we will try to focus on some. These are the questions from the workbook. One of them stating the process in which bone cells gradually replace cartilage. You have the process of ossification, right? Okay, so the ossification. The axial skeleton includes bones of the ribs. Yeah. This is for the axial because arms and legs are perpendicular, and you can do others yourself, but I just want to show you some figures. See, this figure is found in the workbook of students. It's the same as that of the student book, the colorful one, but this one is white and black. You should know that this must be familiar to you. You should know it. They are the same labels. And yeah, these are from the assessment guidebook, students. You should know them. You see, for example, this one is a ball and socket joint. It's found in the, okay, let me just label them. I'm talking about this one, ball and socket. Okay, sorry, this one. This one is hinge. That is like the joint of knee. This one that's located at the base of the thumb. And we have the hinge joint, the knee joint again. And we have the ball and socket here, the hinge joint, the gliding joint. So what I want you to know, you should memorize, you should know these figures, and they have come in the general examination, some of them. So try to know them all. The names are mentioned, you should just know where are these bones located and to which type of joint do they belong. And see, two more diagrams. You see, for example, this one, here you have number 1, you have the bone marrow. Number 2, you have the compact bone. Number 3, the blood vessel. And number 4, the spongy bone. And here you have the skull. You have the vertebral, this one, the vertebral column. And the humerus. Okay, student, there is just a mistake. Please correct it. I haven't noticed before. The third one is not the fibula, it is the humerus, and this one is the fibula. I mean, just the labels, there was a misunderstanding, like from the labels, the numbers. So the third one is the humerus, and the fourth one is the fibula. And these are from the general examinations. We cannot cover them all. See, like this one for the first section, but if we go to the second section, let's see what figures have come. See, this one has come, this one has come, this one has come. What else? See, this one, as I told you from the assessment guide, this one is also a bone from the skeletal system. This one, epiphyseal plane, this one, that one. So see, these are some of the figures from this book, so you should know them all. Thank you so much for your listening. I hope you find it useful. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye.